Rain hammered the glass of a room where 400 years of money sat down to eat. At table 4, a fork hit the china and nobody picked it up. The old woman in black silk had spoken 4 words under her breath. A dialect from one small pocket of hill country, swallowed consonants, meant for no one. Meant to be safe. The waitress refilling her glass answered, not in English. In the same tongue, the same hills, the same music at the end of the line, and the old woman's hand went to her pearls and began to shake. 40 people stopped chewing at exactly the same second. Somewhere in that building hung a painting nobody had looked at closely in 95 years. A woman with a pomegranate, a face that was not her face, and the girl in the too big apron, $640 to her name. A dying father on the 4th floor was about to open her mouth again. The room leaned in. The whole dining room went quiet. Not restaurant quiet. Not the polite hush of forks pausing between courses. This was the other kind. The kind where 40 people stop chewing at exactly the same second, and nobody can explain why, and the silence has a shape to it, and the shape is fear. At table 4, a 74-year-old woman in black silk dropped her fork. It hit the china, loud. Nobody moved to pick it up. And the waitress standing over her, 27 years old, 5'4" apron strings, knotted twice because the uniform was a size too big, kept talking. In a language she was not supposed to know. Rewind 14 hours. Ilaria Fontanelli was on the number 6 train at 6:40 in the morning, wedged between a man's backpack and the door, and she was practicing. Not the specials. Not the wine list. Solvent ratios. She had a little notebook in her apron pocket, the cheap kind, with the wire spiral bent out of shape, and on page 11, she knew. It was page 11. She'd looked at it that many times. There was a chart she'd copied out by hand 3 years ago in a studio in Florence. Acetone to mineral spirits. Percentages. The gentle end of the scale for old varnish that had gone the color of weak tea. She read it on the train the way some people read scripture, because if she stopped reading it, she might forget it. And if she forgot it, then the whole thing had been for nothing. Her father used to say a person needs 2 hands, and one stubborn idea. Tommaso Fontanelli had come over from Siena at 26, with a canvas roll of chisels and no English, and he'd spent 40 years restoring other people's furniture in a basement shop in Astoria. Dining tables, church pews, a carousel horse once that took him 7 months and made him cry when the truck came for it. He raised her alone after her mother died. Ilaria was 9, and when she got into the master's program in Florence, the real one, the one with the waiting list, he sold the chisels. All of them. She found out 4 months later on a video call when she asked why the wall behind him looked so bare. He shrugged like it was nothing. Tools are tools, he said. You are you. She'd cried into a pillow in a rented room in Italy so he wouldn't hear it. That was 3 years ago. Now he was on the 4th floor of St. Ambrose Medical Center with congestive heart failure and a hospital bracelet with his name spelled wrong, and the chisels were gone, and she was on a train reading page 11. The Vermeil room sat 4 blocks off the park behind a door with no sign on it. That was the whole point. If you needed a sign, you weren't invited. Inside mahogany, the color of dried blood, gold leaf on the ceiling, a wine cellar with a temperature log. Somebody actually checked. The air smelled like truffle oil and money, and underneath that faintly industrial floor cleaner. Ilaria had worked there 11 months. In 11 months, not one guest had ever asked her name. They said, "Excuse me." They said, "Miss." Mostly they said nothing at all, they just lifted 2 fingers off the tablecloth and you came, because that was the arrangement. She'd stopped taking it personally around month 4, which is not the same as stopping feeling it. Fontanelli. Gideon Pruitt came down the service corridor sideways the way he always did, like the hallway was too small for his sense of urgency. Floor manager. 41. A man who had decided somewhere along the line that kindness was a form of waste. Table 4. Grisanti party. 6 minutes out. Ilaria straightened. Her hip found the counter edge, the bruise from this morning's train. A good one. Purple already. And she winced and hid it. "Water and bread service," Pruitt said. "That's it. That's your whole night." "Yes, chef." "Don't say yes, chef. I'm not a chef." He snapped his fingers near her ear. She hated that. "Rules. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not make eye contact with Mr. Grisanti. And the mother?" He stopped. Actually stopped. Pruitt never stopped. "The mother is going to complain," he said. "About the temperature. About the lighting. About the century. You will nod. You will apologize. You will disappear. Is that clear?" "Yes. Because if that woman has a bad night, Fontanelli, this restaurant has a bad decade." He went. The kitchen door swung twice behind him and settled. Ilaria picked up the silver pitcher and held it against her chest like a shield. Everybody in the city knew the Grisantis. Cosimo Grisanti, 32, chief executive of Grisanti Maritime, a shipping empire. His great-grandfather started with 2 boats and a grudge. The magazines called him the coldest man in New York. They wrote it like a compliment. But the one you actually worried about was the mother, Ercilia Grisanti, 74. There was a story that went around the industry, probably half true, which is the most dangerous kind, that she'd sent a risotto back at a 3-star place uptown and made the chef cry. Not because it was cold, because she said it was sentimental. The doors opened at 8:15, and the room changed pressure. Cosimo Grisanti came in first, taller than the photographs. Charcoal suit that had clearly been built around him rather than bought. Dark hair pushed back. He moved through the room like a man crossing an airport, present efficient, entirely somewhere else. He looked tired in a way that money can't touch. On his arm, Delphine Ashcroft Vane. 29. Real estate money, 3 generations of it. Red dress, smile like a paper cut. Ilaria knew her. Everyone on staff knew her. Delphine had a habit of handing you her coat without looking at you, and if you weren't there yet, she just let it drop. And behind them, came the mother. Ercilia Grisanti walked with a cane, and within about 4 seconds, Ilaria understood that the cane was not for walking. It was for pointing. At a chair that was crooked, at a napkin folded wrong, at a chandelier she'd apparently decided against. Black silk. Silver hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. A face built entirely out of straight lines. Pruitt practically sprinted the length of the room to meet them, and bowed so low that Ilaria genuinely worried about his hamstring. "Signora Grisanti, Mr. Grisanti, Miss Ashcroft Vane, your table is—" "It smells like a hospital," Ercilia said. Her voice came out low and dry with an accent 40 years in America hadn't sanded down by even a millimeter. "Mother, it's lavender." "Lavender is what you put on top of a smell. It's potpourri. That is a French word for hiding something." Cosimo exhaled through his nose. It was Ilaria thought the exhale of a man who had been having this exact conversation since breakfast, possibly since 1994. They moved toward the window, and as Delphine passed, her handbag swung. It caught Ilaria square in the stomach, a real hit hardware, and all the kind that folds you an inch at the middle, and the pitcher sloshed, and Ilaria stepped back hard into the wall. Delphine did not turn around. She checked the bag for scratches. "Watch where you're standing," she said to nobody. And here's the part that stayed with Ilaria afterward. Cosimo Grisanti saw it. He looked back. His eyes landed on her, and something crossed his face, not quite apology, not quite anger, something with no name and no follow-through. Then Delphine tugged his sleeve. "Come on, Cos. Don't let the help slow us down. I have so much to tell you about the gala." Her voice went from acid to honey in under a second. It was, Ilaria had to admit, an impressive piece of engineering. Get through the shift. That was the whole prayer. That was all of it. Get through the shift. Get the tips. Pay the electric, refill the prescription. Get to the hospital before visiting hours. Close, tell him. You're fine. Tell him you're fine. Tell him. She walked to table 4 with the pitcher. "Good evening. Sparkling or still?" "Sparkling for me and for Cosimo," Delphine said, not looking up from the menu. "And the old lady will have tap. She doesn't like bubbles." Ilaria's hand stopped in the air. The old lady. At a table where the woman's name was on the deed to half the fleet in New York Harbor. Ilaria looked at Ercilia Grisanti, and the old woman was looking straight at Delphine, and her jaw had gone very still, and there was something behind her eyes that Ilaria recognized immediately, because she'd seen it on her father's face in a doctor's office in March, when a resident half his age called him pal. Not anger. Something older and quieter and worse. "I will have sparkling," Ercilia said, "with lemon." Delphine rolled her eyes and turned to pay. "Whatever. Just bring it." Ilaria poured. Slow, steady. The way she'd been taught glass at the 2 o'clock position. No ice unless requested. Don't let the lip touch the rim. She set Cosimo's down last and caught the edge of his cologne. Sandalwood. Salt. He looked up. For half a second, their eyes met, and she remembered Pruitt saying no eye contact, and she thought too late, and what she saw there was not coldness. It was a man in a very expensive chair, trapped between 2 women counting the minutes. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome, sir." "Excuse me." Delphine snapped her fingers. Twice. "I didn't ask for ice." Ilaria looked at the glass. There was no ice in the glass. There had never been ice in the glass. There was no ice within 4 feet of the glass. "Ma'am, there isn't any." I said, "Take it back." Delphine held the glass up to the light, examining it like evidence. "It looks cold. I hate cold water. Room temperature." And then she laughed and turned to Cosimo for backup. "Honestly, Cos, this place is going downhill. Is it so hard to find competent help anymore?" Cosimo did not laugh. "Just change the water." "Please," he said, and his voice was polite and it was distant, and it was the sound of a man who had learned that fighting the small things costs the same as fighting the large ones, so you might as well save it. Ilaria took the glass. Her knuckles went white on the stem. Right away. And behind her as she walked, she heard it pitched exactly loud enough to carry, "She looks like a rabbit. $10 says she dropped something before the entrees. She made it to the service station." She set the glass down. She put both hands flat on the steel counter. She closed her eyes. "Uno, due, tre." She counted in Italian because that was her grandmother's trick, Nonna Elide, who had a temper like a struck match, and a rule that you never ever let a person see the flame. Quattro. Cinque. She thought about a studio in Florence with north-facing windows. She thought about the smell of turpentine at 8 in the morning. She thought about a fresco she'd worked on for a semester, a woman's hand, just the hand, and how it had taken her 9 days to lift 200 years of soot off 4 inches of plaster. 9 days. 4 inches. She'd been so happy she couldn't sleep. Sei, sette. She opened her eyes and picked up the water and went back out. The appetizers came and went, and the atmosphere at table 4 calcified. From the pillar, Ilaria could watch the whole thing like a play she hadn't bought a ticket for. Delphine talked, continuously. Names of people, names of designers, an anecdote about her trainer that had no ending and never arrived at one. Cosimo nodded on a delay, like a satellite feed. And Ercilia Grisanti sat with her arms folded and her food untouched, looking out at the rain on the street. And Ilaria thought, she's the loneliest person in this room. And she's sitting with her son. She stepped in during a gap. Is everything all right with the carpaccio, signora? Ercilia poked it with one tine of her fork. Once. It is too cold. This meat has no soul. It tastes like it lived in a refrigerator and never once saw the sun. I can have the kitchen. Don't bother. Delphine waved her off. She complains about everything. It's the best beef in the city, Ercilia. Just eat it. The old woman's jaw set. She pushed the plate away, not dramatically. About 2 inches, which was worse. Where I am from, we do not eat plastic and call it dinner. Well, we're in New York, darling. Delphine smiled. Adapt or starve. Cosimo set his wineglass down. The stem made a sound against the wood. Delphine, that's enough. I'm just saying, Cos. We're supposed to be talking about the merger, and she's grieving a cold appetizer. Delphine turned. You, take the plate. Bring the mains. And another bottle of the Cabernet, quickly. Ilaria reached for the plate. And that's when Ercilia Grisanti said it. Not to anyone. Under her breath. Fast and low, the vowels running together, the way they only do in one small pocket of hill country, west of Florence. Serpe velenosa, nessun rispetto, nessun cuore. Povero figlio mio, cieco davanti a una strega. Poisonous snake, no respect, no heart, my poor son, blind in front of a witch. Ilaria's hand stopped over the plate, because she knew that dialect. Not Italian, not the clean textbook Italian she'd written her thesis in. That dialect, the specific one, the one with the swallowed consonants and the extra music at the end of a line, the one her grandmother used on the butcher in Astoria every Saturday for 11 years until the butcher started lowering his prices out of pure exhaustion. The sound of a kitchen in Queens with the windows fogged up. The sound of being 6 years old and safe. Cosimo rubbed his temple. Mama, English, so Delphine can follow. I am speaking to myself. Ercilia lifted her chin. Since no one else listens. I listen. But you have to try. To be fake. To be agreeable. And Delphine laughed. Oh, let her mutter, Cos. She reached for her wine. Senility comes for us all, eventually. Something went up the back of Ilaria's neck like a struck match. Don't. Don't. You have $640 in checking. Your father's cardiologist wants a valve. Rent is on the 11th. You need this job like you need oxygen. And there is no other job, and there is no other plan. And if you open your mouth right now... She looked at the old woman. Ercilia Grisanti was not looking at anyone. She was looking at the tablecloth. 74 years old in her best silk in a restaurant. Her son's money kept the lights on in, and she had made herself small. Senility comes for us all. And Ilaria thought about a hospital hallway in March. "Hey, pal, can you follow my finger?" her father, who read 3 newspapers a day, who could tell you the grain direction of a board by touching it with his thumb. Pal. She had said nothing that day. She had stood in the hallway with her hands folded, and she had said absolutely nothing, and she had carried it around ever since, like a stone in her coat pocket. She picked up the plate. She looked at Delphine Ashcroft Vane, and then she looked at Ercilia Grisanti, and she did not speak in English, and she did not speak in the careful tourist Italian people use to order coffee. She spoke in it, the real one, fast and lyrical and unmistakable. "Signora, il rispetto non si compra coi soldi, e la classe non si mette addosso come un vestito." She let it land. "La serpe sibila solo perché ha paura dell'aquila." Ma'am, respect cannot be bought with money, and class cannot be worn like a dress. The snake only hisses because it is afraid of the eagle. And that's where you came in. The room, the silence, the fork hitting the china. Ercilia Grisanti's hand went to the pearls at her throat. Her eyes had gone wide, enormous, and her mouth opened slightly, and she stared at Ilaria the way you stare at a face in a crowd that belongs to somebody dead. Cosimo froze mid-motion wine glass halfway to the table. He did have the dialect. Not really, but he had the tone, and he had 32 years of watching his mother's face, and he had never in his life seen it do that. Delphine blinked. "What? What did she say?" She looked around. "Did she just insult me?" Ilaria turned back to English. Calm, professional, heart going like a bird against a window. "I simply informed the signora that I would clear her plate, madam." And Ercilia Grisanti laughed. One short, sharp, delighted bark of a laugh, a sound that clearly had not been used in some time. "No." A smile broke the straight lines of her face and rearranged the whole thing. "She said considerably more than that." The old woman leaned forward. She looked at Ilaria. Really looked. The tired eyes behind the glasses, the hair coming out of the twist, the apron knotted twice. "Da dove vieni, ragazza? Where are you from, girl?" And Ilaria answered softly. "Mio padre è di Siena, ma mia nonna era di un paese vicino a Lucca." My father is from Siena, but my grandmother was from a village near Lucca. And here is the thing nobody at that table noticed. Not one of them. Because Delphine was already slamming her palm on the tablecloth. Because Cosimo was already turning. Because the silverware was already jumping. But Ercilia Grisanti had gone white. Not delighted. Not amused. White. Her hand at the pearls had begun to shake a fine tremor, the kind you only see if you're standing close, and Ilaria was standing close. The old woman's lips moved. She said the name of the village, very quietly, almost a question, and then she looked away, fast out the window at the rain, and by the time she looked back, the tremor was gone, and the straight lines had come back down over her face, like a shutter. Ilaria filed it away, without knowing why. Some doors have been held shut so long they don't open anymore. They give. "I don't know what kind of code this is," Delphine was saying on her feet now, "but it is unbelievably rude. 'Cause are you seriously going to sit there and let the help mock me in a foreign language?" Cosimo held up one hand. I wasn't looking at Delphine. He was looking at Ilaria, and the look had changed completely. No longer the customer, no longer the counting the minutes man in the expensive chair. "You speak the dialect," he said, quietly. Yes, sir. My mother has never heard that dialect spoken in this city. Not once in all the years I've known her. It's a beautiful language, Ilaria said. She was still holding the dirty plate. She was aware of this. She could not seem to put it down. It would be a shame to let it go. You're fired, Delphine said. Manager, manager. Gideon Pruitt materialized like a summoned spirit, and he was the color of raw dough. Miss Ashcroft Vane, is there a problem? This person is insulting me. She's conspiring with the old lady. I want her out of this building tonight, and I want this entire meal comped. Pruitt spun on Ilaria, and his face folded into something ugly. Fontanelli, what did you do? I told you I specifically told you. She did nothing. Ercilia Grisanti's voice had changed. The rasp was still there. But underneath it, there was steel now, and the whole room heard it, and Pruitt shut his mouth mid-word. She didn't look at him. She never once looked at him. She looked at her son. Cosimo, if that girl walks out of this room, I walk out with her. A pause. And if I walk out, you may explain to your board why the woman who holds 31% is no longer supporting your merger. Nobody breathed. Cosimo Grisanti looked at Delphine, flushed, blotchy, furious, beautiful, and entirely without a floor under her. Then he looked at Ilaria, who was standing there in a size too big uniform, holding a plate of cold beef, with a bruise on her hip and $640 in the bank, and her manager staring death at her from 4 feet away, and who had not moved an inch. Cosimo smiled. It came on slowly, and it took about 10 years off his face, and it was. Ilaria thought later the first honest thing anyone at that table had done all night. Pruitt. Yes, Mr. Grisanti. Miss Fontanelli isn't going anywhere. He reached down and unbuttoned his suit jacket, leaned back, took his time. In fact, I'd like her to join us. He pushed out the empty chair beside him. Pull up a chair, Ilaria. What, Delphine and Pruitt in stereo? I said. Cosimo didn't take his eyes off her. Pull up a chair. I'd like to hear about Luca, and I think my mother would enjoy an hour with somebody who has an actual soul. Ilaria's stomach dropped through the floor. Sit down. At table 4, in uniform, on the clock. Sir, I can't. I'd lose my job. You won't lose your job. His voice dropped, and there was something dangerous in it, and something warm, and Ilaria could not tell where one ended and the other started. Because I bought the restaurant 9 minutes ago. Delphine's wineglass hit the table. You can't be serious. The owner has been trying to sell to my hospitality group since January. Cosimo turned his phone face up on the tablecloth. I met his number. Effective immediately, I own the building, the cellar, and every employment contract in this room. He looked back at Ilaria, and he pulled the chair out 1 more inch. Sit down, and tell me what else did you say? About the snake and the eagle. She sat. Later, she would not remember deciding to. She would remember the chair being softer than anything she'd sat on in 11 months, and she would remember Gideon Pruitt's face going through 4 separate emotions in 2 seconds, and she would remember Delphine Ashcroft Vane picking up her bag with hands that were not entirely steady, and she would remember Ercilia Grisanti reaching across the tablecloth and putting one dry-ringed 74-year-old hand flat over hers, not patting it, holding it, like a woman grabbing a rope. It was 11:40 by the time the car dropped her at St. Ambrose. She stood on the wet sidewalk for a second, with her apron balled up in her fist, and the rain had stopped, and the whole street was shining, and she felt for the first time in 11 months like something in her life had moved. She pushed through the lobby doors. 4th floor. Room 412. She'd tell him a story tonight. A good one, finally. Papa, you won't believe. She got to the elevator bank and looked up at the floor indicator and stopped. Because the light was off in 412. She could see it from the courtyard window on her way in. She always looked. 11 months, every night, she always looked. He kept the reading lamp on until midnight because he hated the dark in that room. The light was off, and the night nurse, Delia, was already coming down the corridor toward her. Fast, with her hands out. He's fine. That was the first thing Delia said, hands out, palms up, because she'd been a night nurse for 19 years, and she knew exactly what a daughter's face looks like at 11:40 when a light is off. He's fine, honey. He's asleep. He's fine. Ilaria's whole body let go at once. She had to put a hand on the wall. The light. He turned it off himself. Around 9. Delia paused. He said he had a headache. Which was a lie, because Tommaso Fontanelli did not get headaches. He got quiet. And he'd been getting quiet for the last 2 hours, ever since a woman from billing came up to 4 with a clipboard and asked him in a very kind voice whether his daughter had told him about the account. Ilaria. Delia's hand landed on her forearm. Sit down a second. I don't want to sit down. I know. Delia. Administration called at 10:15. Here is how they say it. They don't say we're throwing your father out. Nobody's ever said that in the history of American medicine. What they say is flagged. What they say is pending review of your income declaration. What they say is an anonymous report alleging misrepresentation, which is 4 words doing the work of 1 word, and the 1 word is fraud. The account was frozen. The payment plan was suspended. And if the balance wasn't satisfied by noon tomorrow, 13 hours they'd begin the transfer paperwork to the county facility out past the airport. Ilaria had been to the county facility once to visit a woman from her father's building. 40 minutes on 2 buses, 8 beds to a room, a ventilator alarm going off somewhere down the hall that nobody came to check for 11 minutes, and she'd counted because she'd had nothing else to do with her hands. He wouldn't survive the transfer, she said. I know. He wouldn't survive the week. Honey. Delia's voice dropped. I know. Ilaria stood very still in the middle of that corridor with the fluorescent buzz overhead, and she felt the entire night the chair, the wine, the old woman's hand over hers, the smile she felt all of it slide off her like water off a coat. Who reported it? They don't tell us that. Delia. The nurse looked down the hall, then back. Billing said somebody's office called this afternoon asking about your solvency before the report came in, by about 40 minutes. She hesitated. The name on the inquiry was Ashcroft Vane. Ilaria did not scream. She was aware in a distant clinical way that screaming was one of the available options, and that she had never in her life wanted anything more. Instead, she said, Can I see him? And she went into 412 and sat in the plastic chair by the bed, and she held her father's hand. Rough cracked across the palm 40 years of chisels, and she did not cry because he was a light sleeper. 2 hours. It took her 2 hours. She walked out of that restaurant at 8:50, and by 10:15, she had found my father in a database and put her thumb on his throat. I said one sentence in a language nobody was supposed to understand, and she went looking for the softest thing I own. The story broke at 6:04 a.m. Ilaria was on the number 6 train again, standing in the same spot by the door, and her phone buzzed, and it was a notification from a gossip site she did not follow and had never once opened. Scandal at the Vermeil room. Waitress seduces shipping heir in front of fiancé. There was a photo. Grainy shot through rain from across the street. Cosimo Grisanti's hand at the small of her back as she got into a car. His head turned toward her, her face half lit. It looked like exactly what it wasn't. Sources say the server identified as I. Fontanelli 27 orchestrated a scene to publicly humiliate socialite Delphine Ashcroft Vane. Is this the new face of gold-digging Ilaria? Read it twice. Then she looked up, and the man across from her was looking at his phone, and then at her, and then at his phone. And she thought, oh, this is what she does. She doesn't argue with you. She rewrites you. By 7:15, she had 11 missed calls from numbers she didn't know. By 7:40, someone had found her mother's obituary from 2008 and posted it. By 8, a woman on the platform at 51st had said, not quietly, "That's her." And Ilaria had stood there, with her ears ringing, and understood something that would not leave her for the rest of her life. It takes a decade to build a name. It takes 8 hours to take one. She went to work anyway. Because the shift started at 10, and because she needed the shift, and because the alternative was sitting in a studio apartment in Queens refreshing a comment section. The staff room went silent when she opened the door. 4 people. 3 of them found something urgent to do. The 4th Marisol prep cook 5 years had covered Ilaria's Thanksgiving double, so she could take her father to a cardiologist. Marisol looked at her for a long second. Then she picked up her tray and left. Ilaria stood there in the doorway with her coat still on. Okay, so that's how that goes. Gideon Pruitt was waiting by the lockers, and he was being nice, which was so far outside the natural order that Ilaria's first instinct was to check for exits. Fontanelli. Warm, concerned. Rough morning. I'm on at 10. You're not on at all. Corporate pulled you off the floor pending, you know. He made a gesture. Vague. Managerial. Optics. Corporate is now Mr. Grisanti. Corporate is now a lot of people. He smiled. Listen, off the record, between us, whatever the deal is with you and him, and I'm not judging God knows good for you, you want to be careful. Girls like you don't land soft in this city. Girls like you. She looked at him. And here is the thing about Gideon Pruitt, and Ilaria would only understand it much later. He was not a villain. He was a 41-year-old man with a mother in a facility in New Jersey, and a payment due on the 15th, and somewhere along the line, the arithmetic of his life had quietly changed what he was willing to do. Thanks, she said. Any time. He put a hand on her shoulder as he passed, and she noticed. Because she noticed things. It was literally her training. It was what she'd spent 3 years learning to do. That the sleeve of his jacket was new. Not newish. New. The vent stitch was still in. Gideon Pruitt had not bought a new jacket in 11 months. She stood in the alley behind the Vermeil room with her coat over her uniform and did the math. $640. The balance was $19,400 and change. She had until noon. It was 10:22. Options. 1. Beg the hospital. Tried that at 7 a.m. from the platform. The woman was kind and had no authority, which is the most expensive combination in America. 2. Beg Cosimo Grisanti. She stopped there for a while. Because he'd offered. Not in words, but he'd offered come to the tower at 9, I have work for you. And all she had to do was walk into that building and say my father is dying, and a woman you almost married is the reason. He'd write the check. She knew he'd write the check. And then every single thing that woman said about me becomes true. Not in his eyes. Maybe not even in mine. But there is a version of me that walks into that lobby with her hand out on day 2. And I would have to live with her. Nonna Elide had a saying about this. She'd say, "You can accept bread from anybody, but never let a man hand you your own dignity, because then he owns the receipt." Ilaria pushed off the wall. 3. Sell them something. The lobby of the Grisanti Tower was designed by someone who wanted you to feel your net worth in your knees. 50 floors of glass. A ceiling you couldn't see the top of. Air that cost money. Ilaria walked in at 10:50 in a cheap wool coat and yesterday's mascara, and she went straight to the desk. The receptionist looked up. Blonde, lacquered. Her eyes went to Ilaria's face, then to the tablet lying face up on the desk, where a certain photograph was open in a certain browser tab. Deliveries are around the back. I'm not a delivery. I have a 9 o'clock with Mr. Grisanti. It's 10:50. I'm aware. Mr. Grisanti is a very busy man, and I don't show you on the send her up. The voice came out of the speaker on the desk, and the receptionist jumped about 4 inches, and her face went the exact shade of raw dough that Gideon Pruitt's had gone the night before. Ilaria filed that away, too. Everybody in this city is somebody's Pruitt. The elevator opened directly into the office. Panoramic glass. Manhattan laid out gray and wet in every direction, and a desk you could land a plane on, and none of it registered. Because there was an easel in the middle of the room, covered in a drop cloth, and Ilaria's whole body turned toward it the way a plant turns toward a window, and she had to physically stop her feet. Cosimo Grisanti stood by the glass. Navy no-tie top button open. He looked like he hadn't been to bed. "You saw it," he said. "The article." "Yes, I did. So did 400,000 other people." He turned. The tip came from a burner. The burner was purchased on a corporate card belonging to a holding company. The holding company has one asset and one director. A pause. Delphine has never in her life understood that money leaves footprints. Mr. Grisanti. Cosimo. Mr. Grisanti. Ilaria kept her hands at her sides. "You said you had work." He studied her. Then he crossed the room and pulled the cloth off the easel. And Ilaria Fontanelli forgot her father. The noon deadline, the photograph, and her own name for approximately 6 seconds. Because it was a portrait. Oil on canvas, maybe 40 by 30. A woman, dark eyes, dark hair pulled back, holding a pomegranate split open in one hand. And it was dying. A jagged tear ran from the upper left down through the background. 7 inches, at least, the canvas edges curled back like lips. The varnish had oxidized to the color of strong tea, so the whole thing sat under a film of yellow-brown, and the shadows had gone to mud. And on the left cheek, Ilaria's stomach turned over abrasion. Someone had cleaned it. Badly. With something aggressive in circles, and they'd taken the glaze off with the grime. "My great-great-grandmother," Cosimo said. "Painted in 1903. It hung in our house outside Lucca for 4 generations." Lucca. During the war, it was hidden in a wine cellar. 11 months underground. The damp nearly finished it. He put his hands in his pockets. "I've had 5 restorers look at her. Every one of them wanted to repaint the face." Ilaria was already leaning in. Not touching, never touching, but close enough that her breath fogged nothing, because she was holding it. "No," she said. "No, You can't repaint her." She straightened. "If you repaint that face, you are not restoring anything, you are replacing her. That's not conservation. That's taxidermy." Cosimo's eyebrows went up about a millimeter. "Go on." "The varnish has to come off first, and it comes off slowly. You test on the margin down here under where the frame sits where nobody will ever look. You try the mildest thing that works, and you go up from there, not down." She pointed without touching. "But before any of that, you consolidate. See the paint film along the tear? Those flakes are lifting. You so much as breathe on that, and you'll lose flecks you cannot get back. And there is no shop on earth that sells 1903. And the tear. You don't patch a tear." She said it fast, almost offended. "A patch is a scar you glue on top. You thread by thread it from the back. You bridge the individual fibers, you let it dry under weight, and when it's done, the front should show you nothing. That takes time. That takes months. I have 10 weeks. Ilaria opened her mouth, closed it. "Then you get a compromise, and you get told about it up front." She looked at him. "In 10 weeks, I can consolidate her, close the tear, and take the varnish down far enough that you can see her face again. That's real work, and it's honest work. But the deep clean, the retouching the final coat, that's a 6-month job, and I will not lie to you about it, and pretend she's finished. You'd tell a room full of donors that the centerpiece is unfinished. I'd tell them she survived a war, and she's allowed to still be healing." Silence. Rain-moving sighs across 50 floors of glass. "You're hired," Cosimo said. Ilaria blinked. "Just like that." 5 restorers stood where you're standing. He walked back to the desk. 4 of them opened with a number. The 5th opened with a timeline. You opened with what she needs. He looked up. 10,000 for the treatment. Materials on top, whatever they cost, no ceiling, 10,000. Ilaria heard the number and felt the floor tilt, because 10,000 was not 19.4, but 10,000 was something on the table. By noon, and something on the table stops a transfer while lawyers argue. "I accept." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "With one condition." "Go on." "I need the first payment today. Now. Before noon." His face cooled by exactly 1 degree. "That's unusual. Standard is half on delivery." A beat. "Why?" "Lie. You could lie. Say it's tuition. Say it's a deposit on studio space." He'd never check. Except he just told you 5 people opened with a number, and you were the one who didn't. Except you are standing in front of a painting of a woman who survived a war, and you are about to spend 10 weeks pulling 3 generations of dirt off her face, and you cannot do that work with a lie in your mouth. Ilaria set her bag down on the floor. "Because Delphine Ashcroft Vane froze my father's hospital account at 10:15 last night." Cosimo went absolutely still. "She had somebody's office call in an inquiry about my finances, and 40 minutes later, an anonymous report came in accusing me of fraud on my income declaration. The account's suspended. If the balance isn't paid by noon, they start the paperwork to transfer him to the county facility past the airport." "How much is this balance?" "That's not why I'm telling you." "How much?" 19,412. Ilaria's chin came up. "And I'm not asking you for it. I'm asking for the first draw on a contract for work I am going to do." "Ilaria, he's 68. Her voice cracked exactly once, and she put it back together in the same breath. "He came over at 26 with a roll of chisels. He raised me by himself. He sold every tool he owned to send me to Florence, and he never told me I found out from a wall." Cosimo was already reaching for the phone. So no, respectfully, you are not writing a check for my father. She said it fast before he could dial. You're paying an invoice. There's a difference, and it matters to me. His hand stopped over the receiver. Why? Because 400,000 people read this morning that I'm a gold digger. She looked him dead in the eye. And I know it isn't true, but there's a version of today where I let a man I met last night hand me $19,000, and I would remember that version for the rest of my life. And so would she. And she'd be right. Cosimo Grisanti looked at her for a long moment, and then he did something she had not expected, which was that he put the phone down. All right. He came around the desk, opened a drawer, took out a checkbook, an actual one, leather, the kind nobody under 50 has seen, and wrote and tore and held it out. 12,000. Advance on contract. Materials included, itemize them later. His jaw was tight. That's the honest number for what you'll spend before you invoice again. Not a dollar of charity in it. Count it if you want. Ilaria took it. Her hands were not steady. That's still 7,000 short of the balance. I know. Then you'd better be good in a room, Cosimo said, because I'm not calling the hospital. You are. She got there at 11:34. Administration was on the second floor behind a door with a nameplate and a plant that had given up. The woman behind the desk was named Ms. Oyalaran, and she had the face of a person who says no 40 times a day and has stopped enjoying it. Ilaria did not cry. She did not plead. She put a rubber-banded brick of paper on the desk. 11 months of pay stubs, bank statements, the original income declaration with her handwriting on it, the tax return, 2 letters from the restaurant's payroll service, a printout of the payment plan she had never once been late on, never once she'd checked 22 consecutive payments, and she'd made the last one from a phone in a subway station. And on top of it, the check. The report says I misrepresented my income, Ilaria said. So here's my income, all of it, every dollar for 11 months. Compare it to the declaration line by line. I'll wait. I've got nowhere to be. I'm apparently not on the schedule. Miss Oyalaran looked at the stack, then at Ilaria. You brought your taxes. I brought everything. Nobody brings anything. The woman pulled the stack toward her. You would not believe how many people come in here and yell. Yelling's on the list. I'm working down it. And Ms. Oyalaran, 49-21 years in hospital administration. A woman who had absolutely seen it all, made a sound that was almost a laugh. Then she picked up the phone. It took 50 minutes. At 24 minutes past the deadline, the flag came off the account. The check covered through the end of the following month. The plan was reinstated. The fraud report was marked unsubstantiated documentation provided, which is bureaucratic English for somebody lied to us, and this woman proved it. Ilaria walked out into the hallway, and then her legs went. She sat down on the floor outside the elevator bank, with her back against the wall in a hospital corridor in a cheap coat, and she put her face in her hands and shook for about 90 seconds. Nobody stopped. It's New York. Somebody stepped over her. Then she got up, fixed her hair in the reflection of a vending machine, and went up to the 4th floor to tell her father she'd gotten a contract. He said, "Of course you did," like it had never once been in question. She did not go home. She went back to the Vermeil room because her locker was there and her notebook was in it, page 11, the solvent chart 3 years old, and she was not leaving that behind for anybody. It was 4:40, dead hour. The dining room was empty and the kitchen was doing prep, and the whole place smelled like stock. She got the notebook. She turned to go, and on the shelf above the service podium, where nobody keeps anything because it's too high to reach, she saw the corner of a phone, which was not hers, which was Gideon Pruitt's, because it had a cracked screen and a picture of a woman in her 70s taped inside the case, and it was face up, and it was lit, because a message had just come in. She should not have looked. She looked. Confirm receipt. Balance on Friday, as agreed. Keep the personnel file somewhere you can get to it. And above it, scrolling back, she scrolled back. She absolutely scrolled back her thumb. Moved without any input from the management, her address, her hours, her emergency contact, her income declaration. She has a father at St. Ambrose 4th floor. Whatever you have. All of it. And a number. Attached to a name saved as AV Office. Oh, that's how she did it in 2 hours. She didn't have to dig. Somebody handed it to her over the counter. Ilaria stood in the empty dining room of a restaurant that a billionaire had bought 9 minutes into a conversation, and she felt something go cold and level inside her chest. Not rage. Rage is hot and stupid and useful for about 4 seconds. This was the other thing. The thing her father got when a joint didn't sit right, and he'd take the whole piece apart, rather than shim it. She put the phone back exactly where it had been. Face up. Same angle. Then she walked into the kitchen. Prep is 9, people 2, sinks and a radio, nobody's allowed to change. She walked to the middle of the line, and the noise dropped because it was her, and everybody had read it, and Marisol turned around with a knife still in her hand. Gideon Pruitt was at the pass with a clipboard. He looked up. He smiled. Fontanelli, I thought you were... How much? The clipboard stopped moving. Excuse me. How much did you get for me? 9 people stopped working. The radio kept going, which somehow made it worse. I don't know what you think you... My address, my hours, my emergency contact, my income declaration. Ilaria's voice did not rise. That was the thing. It did not rise once. My father's floor number, Gideon. You gave a woman my father's floor number. The color came up his neck in patches. You looked at my phone. It was face up on the shelf where you always leave it, because you think nobody's tall enough to see down. She let that sit. 11 months I covered your Saturdays. I picked up your Thanksgiving. When your mother had the fall in March, I did your clothes for 6 nights, and never once put in for it. Ilaria. So I'm not going to report you. She said it very quietly. I'm not going to sue you. I'm not going to say another word about it to anybody in this building. She looked at the new jacket. I just want to know the number. Silence. Gideon Pruitt opened his mouth, and nothing came out. Not one word. He stood at the pass with his clipboard and his brand new sleeve, and 9 people looking at him, and the radio played, and Ilaria waited a full 5 seconds. Then she said, "That's what I thought," and she walked out through the alley door. She didn't hear what happened after. She didn't hear Marisol set the knife down on the board, harder than necessary. She didn't hear the dishwasher. 19 years old, 6 weeks on the job, say she covered my shift too, man. She didn't hear the silence that settled over that kitchen and stayed for the rest of the night, or notice that nobody spoke to Gideon Pruitt again, except about food. She didn't know that he sat in his car in the lot for 40 minutes, and did not turn the key, or that he took out his phone and looked at the photograph taped inside the case, a woman in her 70s on a porch in New Jersey, squinting into the sun, and turned it face down on the passenger seat, because he could not look at it. She wouldn't know any of that for 10 weeks. What she knew was this. She got on the train at 6:15 with a check stub in her coat and $12,000 of somebody's faith in her and a notebook open on her knee to page 11. And she thought about the woman on the easel. A face under 3 generations of yellow. A cheek somebody had scrubbed raw, trying to make her look better. 10 weeks. 10 weeks to get one woman's face back. Ilaria closed the notebook. So let's start with the varnish, because somebody at some point decided she looked better covered. And I want to know what she looked like before they decided that. They gave her the northeast corner of the 40th floor, 900 square feet that had been a conference room until Tuesday, and by Thursday it had north light through a wall of glass, a humidity monitor, a workbench built to her specifications, and a lock only 2 people had the code to. Ilaria stood in the doorway on the first morning with a paper cup of coffee and did not go in for almost a full minute. Because it smelled like nothing. No stock, no fryer oil, no industrial floor cleaner underneath lavender, just clean air and new plywood, and faintly from the box of materials on the bench, the ghost of ethanol. 11 months of a room that smelled like other people's dinner. She set the coffee down and put on her gloves and got to work. Here is what nobody tells you about conservation. It is boring. It is the most beautiful, boring work in the world. It's 9 days for 4 inches. It's sitting on a stool with a magnifier lamp 2 inches off the surface while your neck screams and your right hand goes numb from the wrist down, and you move a swab the size of a match head, and you count. Not seconds. Rolls, you count how many times you roll the swab. Because if you drag it, you scrub. And if you scrub, you take the glaze off. And if you take the glaze off, some restorer, 100 years from now, opens this thing up and finds out that a woman named Fontanelli was in a hurry. So you roll. And you count. And you do not hurry, no matter who is dying. Week 1 was consolidation. The paint film along the tear had been lifting for 80 years. Little tinted flakes standing up off the canvas like scales, and every one of them was a piece of 1903 that had exactly one more chance. She worked with a warm spatula the size of a fingernail and adhesive, so dilute it looked like water. Flake. Wick it under. Wait, press, count to 20. Move. 211 flakes. It took her 4 days, and she lost 1, the smallest one from the upper background, and it came off on the swab and was simply gone 1 square millimeter of a sky. Some man, mixed by hand, 123 years ago, and Ilaria sat back on the stool and said a word her grandmother would have smacked her for. Then she took a photograph of the loss, wrote the time, and the reason in her treatment log, and kept going. Because that's the job. You don't hide the one you lost. You write it down so the next person knows. Week 2 was the 7¼ inches diagonal through the background and just clipping the shoulder. She worked from the back, with the canvas face down on a padded bed under magnification, with tweezers, and she bridged it thread by thread. Fiber to fiber, adhesive on the tip of a needle. 6 days, and on the 6th day she flipped it, and the tear was not invisible. Nothing is invisible, but you had to know where it was, and you had to be looking, and she sat there for a long time, and felt something she had not felt in 3 years. Competent. She'd forgotten what that felt like. She had genuinely forgotten. He started coming down around 6. The first time, it was business. He wanted a timeline for the gala. He stood in the doorway with his tie already loose and asked 3 questions, and she answered them, and he left. The second time, he brought 2 glasses and a bottle, and did not ask a single question about the timeline. By week 3, it was a thing that happened without either of them ever deciding it was a thing that happened. Cosimo Grisanti would come down at 6, take off his jacket, pour 2 glasses of something absurd, hand her one, and then sit in the chair by the window and not talk, which it turned out was the part she liked, because she'd spent 11 months around people who wouldn't stop. Ask me why I run a shipping company. Week 4, Thursday, rain again. Ilaria didn't look up from the magnifier. Why do you run a shipping company? I have no idea. That got her. She sat back. That's a bad answer for a CEO. It's an accurate answer for a son. He turned the glass in his hand. My father died when I was 26. Same age his grandfather was when he bought the first boat. There's a photograph of the 4 of them in the lobby, and I walk past it 11 times a day. And I have never once in my life woken up and thought about freight. Ilaria took her gloves off. That was significant, though she didn't notice it at the time. So what do you think about? Lung paused. A building, he said, with a workshop in it, where somebody's kid from Corona or Jackson Heights, who can draw, who can actually draw, who's good, who has nobody can learn to do what you're doing. For free. He shrugged, and it was the most awkward she'd ever seen him. It's not a business. My board would eat it in an afternoon. Then don't show them the receipt. Sorry. Fund it out of the foundation and call it heritage. She turned back to the easel. You people have foundations for exactly one reason, and it's to hide the things you actually care about. Cosimo Grisanti laughed. Out loud. Startled real, the kind of laugh a man makes when he's been holding a joke in for 3 years, and somebody finally sets it down next to him. Some nights his mother came. Ercilia Grisanti would arrive at 7 with a driver and a tin of something she had absolutely not yard baked herself, and she would sit in the chair. Cosimo's chair. He gave it up without a word every time, and she would watch. She did not chat. She would say that woman had a hard mouth about the portrait, or the light in here is wrong for evening, or once apropos of nothing, you hold the brush too close to the ferrule, your wrist will go at 50. You've watched someone do this before. No, said Ercilia, which was a lie, and Ilaria knew it was a lie and filed it. They talked about Luca exactly twice. The first time Ercilia asked which village. Ilaria said the name, and the old woman said, and looked at the window and changed the subject to the humidity. The second time was week 5, and Ilaria was cleaning brushes and not thinking, and she sang just a few bars. Something her grandmother used to do at the sink, not opera. A stupid little thing. A song about a girl and a chestnut and a soldier in dialect. The kind of song that has 14 verses and everybody only knows 3. She stopped when she realized. Ercilia Grisanti was sitting completely rigid in the chair with her hand over her mouth. Signora, where did you learn that? My grandmother. She sang it when she... Where did she learn it? From her mother, I assume I don't. Ilaria set the brush down. Signora, are you all right? The old woman stood up. Fast for 74. Faster than she should have been able to, with that cane. It's late, she said. The light in here is wrong. And she left. Ilaria stood in the middle of 900 square feet, with a wet brush in her hand. Okay, so that's the second time. First time was the restaurant when I said Luca, and her hand shook. And I am going to stop pretending I didn't see it. Week 6, varnish. She'd been dreading it and looking forward to it in equal measure, which is how you know a thing matters. She tested first, always test, on the far left margin, under where the frame lip would sit, a patch the size of a grain of rice. Mildest gel first. Nothing. Step up. Nothing. Step up again. And then the swab came away brown. She held it under the lamp and looked at the color of 120 years of tobacco smoke and lamp oil and cellar damp, and underneath on the canvas there was a window the size of a grain of rice. And through the window, green. Not the mud brown she'd been looking at for 6 weeks. Green. A deep, cool, expensive green. A curtain, maybe. Or a wall. Ilaria said out loud to nobody, "Oh, you're in there." It took 11 days to open her face. She worked in a grid, 2 centimeters at a time, marked with tape photographed before and after. Roll the swab, count, change the swab, count. And the woman came up out of the yellow like something surfacing. The pomegranate turned scarlet. The background went from mud to that green, and there was a curtain heavy with a gold cord she hadn't known existed. The dark hair picked up an auburn edge on the left where light was falling from a window. Nobody had been able to see since before Cosimo's grandfather was born. And the face. The face was Ilaria sat back on the stool. The face was tired, not idealized, not soft. Under the varnish, this woman had a line between her brows and a jaw set like a door closing, and her eyes did not look at you the way portrait eyes usually do. They looked at you the way somebody looks at you across a kitchen at the end of a long day when they have decided not to say the thing they're thinking. "Hello," Ilaria said, and then because there was nobody in the room, "You look like you've had a week." She noticed the wrong thing on a Tuesday. Raking light, you set a lamp almost flat to the surface, so the beam skims across it, and every ridge and dip in the paint throws a shadow twice its size. You do it to find losses, to find old repairs, to find where a canvas has been pushed from behind. She swung the lamp around and killed the overheads, and the face lit up like a topographic map. There was a ridge along the jawline, a raised edge, maybe 0.5 millimeter, running from the ear down under the chin and up the other side, and another one at the collar. A hard straight line where no hard straight line should be, because fabric doesn't do that fabric folds. Ilaria's stomach went cold. No, that could be an old fill, that could be a lining crease, that could be... She got the UV lamp. Ultraviolet is how you catch a liar. Original varnish fluoresces one way. Retouching later paint added on top sits dark. It swallows the light. On a clean old picture under UV, you'll see little black freckles where somebody in 1950 touched out a scratch, and that's normal. That's fine. That's just maintenance. Ilaria turned the lamp on, and the room went violet. And she stopped breathing. Because it was not freckles. It was a mask. The entire face, the jaw, the cheeks, the mouth, the throat, the collar, and the shoulders of the dress sat black under the ultraviolet. A solid, deliberate, edge-to-edge black cut with a hard line at the hairline and another at the shoulder seam. Somebody had painted a new face on top of the old one. Not repaired, not touched out, replaced. The eyes were original. Whoever did it had left the eyes. They had painted a whole new woman around a pair of eyes they couldn't bring themselves to cover. Ilaria sat down on the floor. That's a professional term for what happened. She sat down on the floor of a studio on the 40th floor of a building in Midtown Manhattan, in the dark, in ultraviolet light, with her back against the leg of the workbench. The overpaint's under the 1944 grime, so it's before the cellar. 20s, 30s. Somebody in this family took a portrait of their own great-grandmother and hired a man to give her a different face. Why would anybody? She got up and went back to the raking light and found the last thing. Lower right. In the border where an inscription would go. A rectangle. 3 inches by 1. Filled and painted over in the same overpaint as the face, and under the raking lamp. You could see the fill. Sitting a hair proud of the surface, the way a patched wall shows at sunset. There had been words there, and somebody had taken them out. She called Cosimo at 11:40 at night. He came down in 10 minutes in a sweater, which she had never seen, and she did not say hello. Stand there. Don't touch anything. I'm turning off the lights. Ilaria. Stand there. She hit the UV, and she watched a 32-year-old man look at his own great-great-grandmother and see the black mask sitting over her face like a hand. He didn't say anything for a long time. What am I looking at? Overpaint. Deliberate, total, and old, I'd say between 1925 and 1940. Ilaria's voice was very flat, which is what happens to her voice when she's holding something. Somebody repainted her face, her throat, and the top of her dress. They left the eyes. They couldn't do the eyes. She swallowed. I've seen a lot of overpaint, Mr. Grisanti. I've never seen anybody leave the eyes. Why would they do it? That. She pointed the lamp down at the corner. There was an inscription there. It's been filled and covered with the same material as the face. Cosimo Grisanti stood in a violet-lit room in his own building and said quietly, "Can you take it off?" Yes. How long? The inscription, 2 days. It's a small area, and the fill is soft. Whoever did it was fast, which is its own kind of information. She turned. The face is 3 weeks, and I have 4. Then do the inscription first. It took her a and a half. She worked through Friday night with the door locked and a thermos and the radio off because she wanted to hear herself think, and at 4:10 on Saturday morning, the last of the fill came away on the swab. And underneath, in a brown-black script that had not seen air since before the Second World War. Cuciniera di questa casa, 1903. Ilaria read it 4 times. Cuciniera, not signora, not madre, not a family name at all, cook of this house. She sat with it until the sun came up over Queens, so she wasn't a Grisanti. She worked here. She worked in the kitchen of the house she's hanging in. Ilaria pulled the archive box across the bench. Cosimo had sent it up in week 2, and she'd barely opened it. Deeds, ledgers, photographs, a family that kept everything because keeping everything is what people do when they're building a name. She found it in 90 minutes. A ledger, 1899. Household staff wages by the quarter, and there she was in a clerk's copperplate, F, cuciniera and a number. And then 1901, a marriage record. Filomena no surname given to the second son. And 1907, the second son, dead of influenza at 34, and a woman with no surname suddenly holding a shipping business with 2 boats and a debt. And 1911, and 1914, and 1919, the ledgers getting fatter, the fleet getting bigger, the same shaky signature at the bottom of every page, for 22 years. Filomena the cook ran the company. She ran it through a war and a flu and a recession, and she handed her son an empire. And in 1931, Ilaria found the invoice. Restauro e miglioramento del ritratto della fu Filomena. Restoration and improvement of the portrait of the late Filomena. paid to a studio in Florence, signed for by the son. Improvement. He waited until his mother was dead, and then he paid a merchant to give her a better face and take her job title off the frame. She told Cosimo at 9 on Sunday morning in the studio with the lights on. She laid it out on the bench, in order, the inscription, the wage ledger, the marriage record, the 22 years of signatures, the 1931 invoice, and she stepped back and let him walk down the length of it like a man reading a wall. He got to the invoice. He picked it up, put it down. "My grandfather told me she was a contessa," he said. "She wasn't." He told me that story at Christmas every year of his life. I was probably told it too. Ilaria kept her voice level. "That's how it works. You do it once, and then it just becomes the furniture." Cosimo stood with his hands on the bench and his head down. "She saved this family," he said. "She saved the whole thing. Twice." "Yes." "And her own son was embarrassed by her." "Yes." "So he painted over her face." "Yes." And then Cosimo Grisanti said the thing that Ilaria would think about at odd hours for years afterward. And in 1944 somebody carried that painting into a cellar. Neither of them heard the door. It was me. Ersilia Grisanti stood in the doorway of the studio at 9:15 on a Sunday morning in a gray coat with her cane, and she was not leaning on it. "Mama." "Sit down, Cosimo." "What do you mean it was?" "Sit down." He sat. She crossed the room slowly, and she stopped in front of the easel, and she looked at the woman with the pomegranate, and her chin came up. "Not me. My mother's aunt carried it. She was 66 years old, and she went down 11 stone steps in the dark, with that thing under her arm, while the road above her was full of trucks." Ilaria did not move. "They came through in the autumn," Ersilia said. "They were taking everything. Paintings especially, and the family had gone north and the house was empty, except for the people who worked in it." She put one hand on the frame, just the edge, so the staff hid it, in the wine cellar, under the racks wrapped in oilcloth, and it stayed there 11 months, and the damp nearly killed it. "Mama, how do you—" "Because they told me." Ersilia turned. "The people who worked in that house told me. For 17 years. In the kitchen. In the afternoons." Cosimo's face changed. "Why were you in the kitchen?" The old woman was quiet for a moment. Were you in the kitchen?" Then she reached into her coat and took out a small, flat wallet, the kind that holds documents worn shiny at the corners. She put it on the bench. Inside was a passport. Italian. Issued in 1974, expired long ago. The photograph a girl of 22, with a heavy fringe and a wary mouth. The name on it was not Grisanti, and the birthplace was a village near Lucca. The same one. "My father was a cook," Ersilia Grisanti said, "in that house. His father was a cook in that house. Our family fed that family for 3 generations, and in 1974, the son of the house married the cook's daughter. Exactly as it had happened once before, and nobody in that room found it charming." Ilaria's hand went over her mouth. "They gave me a year," Ersilia said. "The mother told me to my face. She said the accent will finish you. And she was correct, so I finished the accent instead." She laughed. It was not a nice sound. 2 years with a woman in Florence. Vowels, consonants, the way you hold a fork, the way you enter a room, how to say a thing, so nobody hears where you're from. Her voice had gone flat and fast. "And I got rid of the songs. That was the last thing. I let the songs go. And after that there was nothing left to catch me on." She looked at Ilaria. "And then a waitress in a stupid gold restaurant opened her mouth at me, and it came out of her like water out of a tap, and I could not breathe. 52 years, Ercilia said. I have not said my own name out loud in 52 years. Cosimo stood up. Mama, don't. She put the cane between them like a bar. I am not finished. She pointed it at the easel, at the woman with the pomegranate. I knew, she said, about the face. I knew in 1979. There were papers in the villa, and I read them, and I sat down on the floor of that library, and I understood what they had done to her. And you never, and I told no one. Her voice cracked, and she put it back, and it was the same trick Ilaria did, and Ilaria heard it, and understood it completely. Because if I told them what they did to her, they would look at me, and they would see the kitchen. She lowered the cane. So I painted over myself instead, and I did it so well, Cosimo, that I raised a son who has never once heard his mother's real voice. Nobody said anything. Rain on 40 floors of glass and a humidity monitor clicking somewhere, and 3 people standing around a woman in a green room holding a broken pomegranate. Then Ercilia Grisanti straightened her coat. Take it off her, she said. Signora, the gala is in. Take it off her. The steel came back into it, all of it, the whole restaurant voice. She fed them. She buried her husband. She ran their boats for 22 years, and her son put a stranger's face on her because he was ashamed of a kitchen. She turned for the door. I have been that stranger's face for 52 years, and I am tired, and I want to see what she actually looked like before I die. And that is precisely when the studio door banged open behind her. Well, said Delphine Ashcroft Vane, isn't this cozy? She was not steady. That was the first thing Ilaria clocked, the eyes too wide, the smile too fixed, a woman running on 4 days of something. Behind her 2 men in suits who were clearly private and clearly uncomfortable. Security has instructions, Cosimo said. He was already moving. Security has a union, and one of them has a daughter who wants an internship. Delphine walked in. Amazing what people will do for their kids. You'd think it'd be money. It's almost never money. She looked around the studio. The bench. The lamps. The tin of biscuits Ercilia had brought and not baked. 6 weeks, she said. 6 weeks and you've built her a nursery. Get out. Or what, 'cause you'll buy another building. She laughed, and it went up too high at the end. You've been on 4 calls with my father's counsel this month, and you didn't tell her. Did you? You didn't tell her that the merger's in the drain, and the board took a vote on Tuesday. Ilaria's head came around. Cosimo did not look at her. Oh, so that's what 6 o'clock silence has been about. Here's the arrangement. Delphine turned hands out reasonable, and that was somehow the worst part, the reasonable. You announce a reconciliation at the gala. 2 minutes. My father's people put the merger back in the room by Monday. And she... The finger came around to Ilaria. She goes back to whatever she was doing with a very nice check, and everybody has a lovely life. No, said Cosimo. I wasn't finished. Delphine's smile did not move. Because I had somebody look at you, and it's fascinating, it really is. Your student visa expired 3 days before your renewal was filed. The floor came out from under Ilaria's feet. No, that was March. That was the week of the heart attack. The office was closed. The attorney said it was cured. The attorney said it was resolved, she said. It was resolved administratively. Delphine tipped her head, which is a very different thing from resolved legally, and my father keeps 4 attorneys who do nothing but explain that difference to people. 1 filing. That's all it is. 1 filing, and you're in review. And review takes 18 months, and you can't work, and you can't leave, and you can't do a thing about it. She leaned in slightly. How's Dad's insurance tied to your employment? By the way, I genuinely don't know. I'd have to look. Ilaria did not answer, because she was watching Delphine's right hand come out of her bag. A small glass bottle, black label, drawing ink. You're evil, Ilaria whispered. I'm winning, said Delphine, and she thumbed the cap off and swung her arm at the easel. Cosimo got there first. He caught her wrist in the air hard, and Delphine yelped, and the bottle came out of her fingers and hit the concrete floor 18 inches from the easel leg, and shattered. Ink went everywhere. Across the floor, up the bench leg, across the toe of a $6,000 shoe. Not one drop on the canvas. Touch that painting, Cosimo Grisanti said, and his voice was very low and very close to her face. And I will not sue you. I will take you apart. I will open your father's offshore filings to the people he plays golf with. I will hand this room's security footage to every editor in this city. He let go of her wrist and stepped back. And you will be nobody here, which is the only thing you've ever actually been afraid of. Delphine stood in the middle of the ink, breathing hard, holding her own wrist. For 1 second, something under all of it looked genuinely frightened. Security, Cosimo said without turning around. 4 guards were already through the door. Miss Ashcroft Vane is leaving. If she comes within 500 feet of this building, or Miss Fontanelli, or St. Ambrose Medical Center, call the precinct and press for trespass and attempted destruction of property. They took her out. She was screaming by the elevator, and the elevator doors cut it off mid-word, and then it was very quiet. Ercilia Grisanti had not moved an inch during any of it. She stood beside the easel with one hand still on the frame the way you'd stand next to somebody in a hospital bed. Ilaria was shaking. She sat down on the stool and put both hands flat on the bench to make them stop, and they did not stop. She can do it, she said. The visa thing. She can actually do it. Ilaria, 18 months, Cosimo. I can't work for 18 months. His insurance is through my employment. Her voice was climbing, and she could hear it climbing, and she could not get underneath it. The board took a vote on Tuesday, and you didn't. I was going to tell you after the gala. Why? Because you were finally sleeping, he said. That stopped her. He crossed the room, and he crouched down in front of the stool, and he did not touch her. She noticed that she noticed he didn't touch her. He just got down to where her eyes were. I have spent my whole life doing what was smart for the name, he said, and I am extremely good at it, and I have not been awake in 3 years. Ink on his shoes, ink on the floor, rain on the glass. You woke me up. Cosimo. The gala is in 26 days, he said, standing. She wants a room full of people. Fine. He looked at the painting. At a woman who had run a fleet for 22 years and had her face taken off her by her own son. We'll give her the room. He went to the door, stopped. Buy a dress, he said. Not black. You've worn enough black for other people. And then he was gone, and it was Ilaria and a 74-year-old woman and 900 square feet of light. Ercilia was still looking at the portrait. 26 days, the old woman said. Can you get her face back in 26 days? Ilaria wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist, which you are never supposed to do with gloves on, and she didn't care. I can get her started. Then start. Ercilia Grisanti turned to go, and at the door, without looking back, she said something in dialect, fast, low-swallowed consonants, the extra music at the end of the line. Non mi lasciare sotto la vernice, ragazza. Don't leave me under the varnish, girl. The envelope came on a Tuesday. Not at 6 in the morning with agents at the door, the way it happens in movies. It came at 2:40 in the afternoon by certified mail, and a man in shorts made her sign for it on a screen with a stylus that didn't work, and he said, "Have a good one," and got back in the truck. Ilaria stood in the vestibule of a walk-up in Queens holding a government envelope. She did not open it for 11 minutes. Because as long as it's closed, it's still Tuesday. As long as it's closed, I still have a job and a father on the 4th floor and 24 days to finish a face. She opened it. It was not a deportation order. That's the thing nobody tells you. There's no man with handcuffs. There's a letter on ordinary paper in a font somebody chose in 1998, and it says your file has been referred for review, and it requests additional evidence, and it lists 9 categories of documentation, and it gives you a date. And at the bottom, in the same flat font as everything else, employment authorization is suspended pending adjudication. Ilaria read that line 8 times. Then she sat down on the second stair in the vestibule with the mailboxes clicking behind her, and she did the arithmetic that every single person in this country who has ever gotten one of these letters does. Can't work. Can't work means no employer. No employer means no insurance. And no insurance means a 68-year-old man with a failing valve becomes self-pay on the 15th of next month, which is 19 days. The lawyer's office was on the 11th floor of a building on Court Street with a linoleum hallway. Not a bad lawyer. That was almost worse. Marguerite Osei Bonsu had been doing immigration work for 22 years, and she had a photograph of her kids and a plant that was actually alive. And she read the letter twice and did not make a face, which meant she was very good at not making a face. "Okay," she said. "First, you are not being deported." "That's not what it—" "I know what it says. I'm telling you what it is." She set it down. "This is a referral. Somebody filed a complaint of material misrepresentation on your renewal. Because of the gap." The gap was 3 days. In March. When my father had a cardiac event, and the attorney's office was, "I believe you." Marguerite folded her hands. "The adjudicator doesn't know you. The adjudicator has a queue." "How long?" "With a complaint attached and a request for evidence." She looked at her. 10 to 18 months. It could be 6. I've seen 22. She held up a hand. "And that's your file this month with whoever opens it. Every case is different. Don't go repeating those numbers to anybody, they'll mean nothing to them." Ilaria heard it, and something in her chest just flattened. 18 months. I can't leave the country either, because if I leave, I abandon the application, and if I abandon it, I can't come back, and my father cannot fly. He cannot fly. The cardiologist said no pressurized cabin until the valve, Miss Fontanelli. So I can't go, but I can't stay either, because staying costs $11,000 a month without insurance, and I have Ilaria. She stopped. "Breathe," said Marguerite Osei Bonsu, who had said that word in this room maybe 4,000 times. "You'll win this. Your documentation is genuinely excellent. I've never seen anybody bring a treatment log to an immigration consult. It's honestly a little unhinged. You'll win." "When?" The lawyer was quiet for a second. "That's the part I can't sell you," she said. "Here's what money can do. Money can buy a restaurant in 9 minutes. Money can build a conservation studio on the 40th floor in 72 hours. Money can put a 68-year-old carpenter in a private room with a cardiologist who returns calls. Here's what money cannot do. Money cannot make a federal adjudicator open a folder 1 day earlier than the folder in front of it. Cosimo Grisanti found that out on a Thursday on the phone with 3 attorneys billing him at once, and Ilaria watched him find it out. She watched a man who had never in his adult life heard the word no from an institution hear it 4 times in 90 minutes. He hung up. He stood at the glass with his back to her. "There's nothing," he said. "I know. There is genuinely, I have called everyone I have, and there is nothing. Cosimo, I know." And he turned around, and he looked lost, and Ilaria thought, "Oh, he's never been here before. He's 32 years old, and this is the first room in his life he can't buy his way out of." The board moved on the following Monday. She got it in pieces. From Cosimo, who told her the clean version. From the business channel playing in a hospital waiting room, which told her the real one. The Ashcroft-Vane Group pulled out of the merger. Publicly. With a statement about strategic misalignment and concerns regarding executive focus, which is corporate for he wouldn't do what we said. The stock dropped 14% in a day. By Wednesday, 2 institutional holders had requested clarity on governance. By Friday, the board voted to appoint an interim chief executive pending a strategic review, and Cosimo Grisanti, 32, great-great-grandson of a woman with 2 boats and a debt, was asked to step back from operations. They let him keep the foundation. That was the part that broke her. They took the company and left him the charity, like handing a man his coat on the way out. He came down to the studio that night at 6, exactly on time, with 2 glasses and a bottle, and he sat in the chair by the window. "So," he said, "that happened. Cosimo, it's a strategic review. They're very common." He poured. "My father survived too. Your father wasn't in a strategic review because of me. You didn't do this. I said 1 sentence in a restaurant. You said 1 true thing in a restaurant." He handed her the glass. "This family has been running on untrue things since 1931. Something was going to give." He drank, and Ilaria stood in the middle of 900 square feet with a paintbrush in her hand and looked at the man in the chair, and she understood something with total clarity, the way you understand things at 6 in the evening when you're tired enough. He's going to keep choosing me, every single time. He's going to keep standing in front of it. And there is no version of this where the bill stops coming. She left on a Saturday. Not dramatically. She hated drama. She had lived through 6 weeks of other people's drama, and she had developed an allergy. She got to the studio at 5:30 in the morning before the building was awake, and she did the work properly. She wrapped the portrait in acid-free tissue and glassine. She wrote up the treatment log, every step, every solvent, every percentage, the flake she'd lost in week 1, and she left it open on the bench to the last page. Then she wrote out the rest of the protocol by hand. 4 pages. What she'd done, what remained the exact gel formulation for the overpaint, where to start on the jaw, and why the 2 areas where the original was thin and a stranger would go through it. She clipped it to the log. At the top she wrote, "For whoever finishes her." Go slow on the left cheek. Somebody already scrubbed her there once. And then she stood there for a minute. "This is the best work I have ever done. And I am going to walk out of here and let a stranger sign it." She put her key card on top of the pages. The note she left him was 6 lines. She rewrote it 4 times, and every version was worse than the last, so she kept the shortest one. "Cosimo, you are not allowed to keep paying for a sentence," I said. "The company is $18.99. I am 8 weeks. Don't come to Queens. If you come to Queens, I will not be strong enough to say this twice. Finish her. She's earned it. He came to Queens. Obviously, he came to Queens. He stood on the stoop of a walk-up on 43rd Street at 9 at night, in a coat that cost more than the building's boiler, and he did not shout, because he was not a man who shouted. He said, "Come back," and she said no. "Ilaria, they took your company. They took a title. They took the thing your father gave you and your grandfather and a woman who ran a fleet for 22 years with no surname." Her voice was shaking. She let it shake. "And I have known you for 8 weeks. That's not. I have known you for 8 weeks, Cosimo, and you have lost a merger, a board seat, and 14%, and I have a letter in my kitchen that says, I can't legally work in this country, and I do not know when that ends." "Then let me." "Don't." She put a hand up. "Don't say the sentence. I know the sentence. It ends in a number, and once you say it, I stop being a person who did a job, and I start being a thing you rescued. And that is exactly what she said I was. And I will not hand her that. Not for him. Not even for him." The street was very loud and very quiet at the same time. "I don't know how to not fix things," Cosimo said. "I know. Nobody has ever asked me to just stand somewhere. I know." Ilaria's eyes were streaming, and her voice was completely level, which is a trick she had learned from a woman in a black coat. "Go home. Please. Go finish her." She went inside. She watched him from the second-floor window for 11 minutes before the car pulled away. Her father went down on the following Thursday. Fluid on the lungs. They caught it fast. That's what the private room bought. Somebody was actually watching the monitor, but the word decompensation got used, and then the word timeline, and Ilaria sat in a plastic chair for 19 hours and watched a man she had built her entire life around go somewhere she could not follow. At 2 in the morning, a resident came in and said something optimistic and left. At 3, Delia came in off shift and sat with her and didn't say anything at all, which was the single kindest thing anybody did that month. At 4, Ilaria took out her phone and looked at Cosimo Grisanti's name and did not call it. Because if I call him now, it isn't a choice anymore. Because the only thing I have left that's mine is that I didn't ask. She put the phone face down on her knee. At 9:15 on Friday morning, Ercilia Grisanti walked into room 412. No driver, and the cane was in her hand like an umbrella, not on the floor. Ilaria stood up so fast, the chair scraped. "Signora, sit." "How did you—" I asked at the desk. Ercilia looked at the bed, at the man in it, at the machines. "Nobody stops a woman my age. It's the one advantage." She sat down in the other plastic chair. 74 years old in wool in a hospital at 9 in the morning. She did not say it will be all right. She did not say he looks well. She did not take Ilaria's hand. She reached into her coat and put the worn, flat wallet on the bed rail. "The passport. Take it out," she said. Ilaria opened it. Earl of 22, heavy fringe, wary mouth, a name that was not Grisanti, and a village near Lucca. "I brought that to New York in 1986, Ercilia said, in the lining of a suitcase, because I could not throw it away, and I could not have it found. Signora, 40 years it has been in a box behind the winter coats, 40 years in the dark wrapped up." She looked at the photograph. "Do you know what that is? That is the exact same thing they did to her. Only I did it to myself, and I did it for free." Ilaria's hands were shaking. "Ercilia, I can't take this. I'm not giving it to you. I'm showing it to you." The old woman's voice went hard. "Because you are 27, and you are sitting in a plastic chair, deciding to be small." and I have watched that decision from the inside for 52 years, and I am going to tell you what is at the end of it." She leaned in. "Nothing," she said. "There is nothing at the end of it. You get to be safe and comfortable and correct, and one day you sing 4 lines at a sink, and a girl in an apron looks at you, and you cannot breathe, because there is a whole person in there that you buried alive to keep the peace." "I did the right thing," Ilaria said. "You did the quiet thing." He lost his company. He lost a seat. He is 32, and he owns 11%, and he has never once in his life been interesting until this spring. Ercilia sat back. "I am not here about my son. My son is fine. My son is going to be fine whether you exist or not. And if you go back to him only to save his stock price, then you deserve each other. And I'll come to the wedding and be bored." She pointed at the bed. "I am here about her." The woman on the easel. Ercilia's voice cracked, and she let it, and that was the first time Ilaria ever heard her let it. "You are the only person alive who knows what is under that paint. You found the inscription. You read the ledgers. You know she was a cuciniera, and you know what her son did to her, and you know how to take it off." She stood up. "And if you walk away now, then in 100 years somebody opens her up again and finds nothing but the same lie with better lighting." She put a hand on the door frame. "Do not leave her under the varnish, girl. I have asked you once." The room was very quiet after she left. Ilaria sat with the passport in her lap and the machines going and the light coming in gray off the air shaft. And a voice, thin and dry and enormously irritated, said, "She talks like my mother." Ilaria was on her feet so fast the passport hit the floor. "Papa, don't!" Tommaso Fontanelli lifted 2 fingers off the blanket. That was all he could lift. "Don't do the face. I hate the face. You've been out for... I've been in." He swallowed. It took a while. "In and out. I heard the Italian one. Some of it." "How much of it?" "Enough." She sat down on the edge of the bed and took his hand, and it was cold, and cracked across the palm 40 years of chisels. "I'm going to fix this," she said. "Ilaria. I'm going to fix all of it. I just need to... Ilaria." She stopped. Her father looked at the ceiling for a moment, gathering it, the way you do, when every word costs you something. "You know what I did for 40 years, he said. "Yes." "Say it." "You restored furniture." "No." His fingers moved against hers. "Anybody can strip a table and put a new top on it. That's not restoring. That's replacing, and they charge you $400 for it, and it looks beautiful, and it's dead." He turned his head. "You know the secret, Papa. The secret is you never pretend the crack wasn't there." The room went very still. "You find where it split," he said, "and you clean it out, all the old glue, all of it down to raw wood. And then you fill it, and you clamp it, and you leave it alone for a day and a half. Breath, machines. And when you're done, if you did it right, you can still see it. If you know where to look, you can still see the line." He squeezed her hand. "Barely. It was the strongest thing that had happened in that room in 19 hours. That's not a failure, Cucciola. That's the proof. That's how you know it's the same table and not a new one wearing its clothes." Ilaria could not speak. "I sold the chisels," her father said. "Papa, I never—" "Let me. I've been waiting a year." He closed his eyes for a second. "I sold them, and you found out from a wall, and you never said a word, and you've been carrying it around like it was a debt. It is a debt. It's a crack." He opened his eyes. "It happened. It's in the wood. And you have spent 3 years trying to sand it out of yourself instead of just leaving it there. Where it belongs. Where it makes you stronger than a girl who never had to sell anything. He let go of her hand. Now go finish the picture. She stood in the 4th-floor hallway of St. Ambrose Medical Center at 10:40 in the morning. And she did not cry. She got out her phone. Marguerite. First, because you don't build on wet glue. The lawyer picked up on the second ring. It's Fontanelli. I need to know one thing, and I need a straight answer. Ilaria's voice had gone flat and fast and technical, which is what happens to her voice when she has finally decided something. If I finish an unpaid, uncompensated conservation treatment on a privately held painting, no wages, no invoice, nothing of value received, am I working? A pause on the line. Then slowly, you want to volunteer. I want to know if it's legal. It's hang on. Papers, keys. You'd need to document it exactly. No compensation of any kind. No promise of future compensation. Nothing in kind. Not a meal, not a car service. Nothing. Fine. Ilaria, you'd be doing $30,000 of specialist labor for free while you can't pay rent. Yes. Why? Ilaria looked down the hallway at the door of room 412. Because she's been under there since 1931, she said, and there is nobody else in this city who knows how to get her out. She called Ercelia second. I'm coming back. Good. Not to him. Not yet. To the work. Ilaria was already walking. And I need 3 things, and you're not going to like any of them. Say them. 1. The studio unpaid in writing on foundation letterhead. My lawyer drafts the language, and nobody argues with a comma of it. Done. 2. Full access to the 1931 archive. The invoice, the ledgers, the marriage record, the wage book. Originals. Done. 3. Ilaria stopped at the elevator. Whatever I find under that face, I show the room. All of it. Not a sanitized version, not a nice paragraph about heritage. The kitchen, the wage book, the sun, everything. Silence on the line. Long enough that Ilaria's stomach dropped. Then Ercelia Grisanti said very quietly in dialect, Finalmente. Finally. 11 days. That was what was left. 11 days to lift an overpaint she had estimated at 3 weeks, and she knew exactly how insane it was, and she did it anyway. She moved into the studio. Not figuratively. There was a couch on 41, and she used it for 4 hours a night, and the rest of the time she was on the stool with the magnifier 2 inches off a dead woman's jaw. Roll the swab. Count. Change the swab. Count. The overpaint came off in a grid 2 centimeters at a time, and it fought her. 1931 paint it's tougher than the 1903 underneath it, which is the whole problem. That's why 5 restorers wanted to leave it alone. Day 3, she almost went through at the temple and stopped for 6 hours with her hands flat on the bench until they were steady. Day 6, the mouth came out. And it was not the mouth on the surface. The 1931 mouth was small and pleasant, and slightly turned up. The 1903 mouth was wider and heavier at the corners, and it was not smiling, and it had absolutely no interest in whether you liked it. Day 8, the jaw. Day 9, the throat and the collar, and under the high pearl-buttoned lace collar somebody had painted in 1931, there was the original. Open at the neck, plain linen, and a thin gold chain, and hanging from it small and unmistakable, and rendered by a painter in 1903, with obvious care, a key. A kitchen key. She'd worn it to sit for her own portrait. Ilaria put down the swab, and sat back on the stool at 4 in the morning on the 10th day, and looked at the woman she had spent 10 weeks with. Tired eyes, line between the brows, a mouth that had said no to people. A pomegranate split open in one hand, and the key to a kitchen around her neck. "There you are," Ilaria said. And then she laughed out loud alone at 4 in the morning, 40 floors above Manhattan. They painted over that. They looked at that face and thought it needed improving. She reached over and turned the raking lamp off. "Okay, Philomena," she said. "One more day, and then you and I are going to go ruin a very expensive party." The Corvain Hotel had a staircase built in 1911 for exactly one purpose: to be walked down. 22 steps of Italian marble under a ceiling of cut crystal, and at the bottom, 400 of the most photographed people in New York holding drinks. They weren't drinking, waiting for a car crash. Because everybody had read it. All of it. 10 weeks of it. The waitress. The stock drop. The board vote. The heir who lost his own company over a girl who poured water. They had come to watch a man's life end in formal wear. Ilaria Fontanelli stood at the top of the stairs and could not feel her hands. Not black. She'd bought it herself with the last of the 12,000, the honest money, the invoice money, and it was gold, silk-heavy cut, plain, no beading, nothing. She'd walked into a place on Orchard Street with a photograph on her phone of a 1903 portrait and said like this, "But I have to be able to breathe." Her hair was up, her mother's earrings not diamond, small glass, probably, and in her left hand, a folder. Not a clutch, a folder. Manila, institutional, with a rubber band around it. 400 people were about to watch a woman in couture come down a marble staircase carrying office supplies. Good. Let them look at the folder. "You're shaking." Cosimo Grisanti came up beside her in a tuxedo, and he did not look like a man who had lost 14% and a board seat. He looked awake. "I'm fine. You're vibrating. That's a different thing." Ilaria did not look at him. "Is she down there?" A pause. "She got in 20 minutes ago," Cosimo said. "On somebody's +1. The order covers my building. This hotel isn't my building, and she knew that." He shrugged. "I told security to let her." Ilaria's head came around. "You told them to let her?" "You said you wanted the room." He offered his arm. "That's not a room. This is a room." They descended, and the noise did the thing that noise does. It didn't stop. Exactly. It drained row by row, table by table, like water. Going out of a tub until by step 14, there was nothing left but the string quartet, who kept playing because nobody had told them anything. 400 faces turned up, and Ilaria thought with total clarity, 11 months I carried water past people exactly like this, and not one of them ever looked at me. Now look at you, all of you, looking. She kept her chin level, and did not smile, and did not stumble, and made it to the bottom. Ercilia Grisanti was already at the front, seated in black silk, with the cane across her knees like a rifle. She looked Ilaria up and down. Gold, she said. Too much. 50 years too late, said the old woman, and turned back to face the stage. The portrait stood on an easel at center stage under a velvet cover, and beside it on a smaller stand, a second covered object nobody had asked about. Cosimo took the microphone at 9:04. "Good evening." The room leaned forward for the wrong reason. "Every year, the Foundation gives this speech about legacy, preservation, continuity. My father gave it. My grandfather gave it. He set down his notes. He hadn't looked at them. I'd like to talk about what preservation actually means because I found out this spring that my family has been doing the opposite of it for 95 years. A ripple. Confusion. A phone came up in the third row. So this year we did something different. We hired a conservator. She has spent 10 weeks on a portrait of my great-great-grandmother and what she found. Oh, for God's sake. Delphine Ashcroft Vane came out of the crowd with a microphone in her hand. Red. Of course red. She'd taken it off the MC's stand, and nobody had stopped her because nobody in that room had ever once been stopped. Ladies and gentlemen. She turned to the tables, and she was smiling, and her hand was not steady. Before this gets any more embarrassing, look at her. Just look at her. Every phone in the room came up at once. 10 weeks ago, that woman was refilling water glasses. 10 weeks. Now she's in couture, wearing his family's name like a coat. She pivoted, playing the room, and she was good at it. That was the awful part. She was very good at it. She's a fraud. Her visa is under federal review. That's not gossip. That's a matter of record. She's unemployed. Her father is in a hospital she cannot pay for. And this man, she swung toward Cosimo, lost his company over her. 14%, a board seat, his father's chair. She let it land. So no, I'm not going to stand here and watch him hand her a microphone. Somebody in this family has to still be sane. Silence. And it was ugly. Ilaria could feel it, the whole room recalculating in real time, because half of it was true, and true is the strongest poison there is. She started forward, and a hand came down on her forearm. Not yet, Cosimo said quietly. Somebody asked to go first. What? A man in a rented tuxedo walked up onto the stage. 41 years old. Ill-fitting jacket because it was rented because he'd sold the new one. Hair combed wrong. A phone in his hand. Ilaria's mouth opened. Gideon Pruitt is on the stage. He got to the microphone and he looked out at 400 of the wealthiest people in New York, and he made a sound that was mostly air. My name is Gideon Pruitt, he said. I was the floor manager at the Vermeil room. Delphine went white. Get him off. On the night of April 9th, Pruitt said louder, reading off his own phone screen with hands that were shaking so hard he had to hold it with both. I gave Miss Ashcroft Vane's office the personnel file of an employee, her address, her hours, her income declaration, her emergency contact. He swallowed. And her father's floor number at St. Ambrose. The room made a sound, not a gasp, something lower and uglier than a gasp. I was paid $9,000 in 2 installments. Pruitt kept going. He did not stop. I have the messages. I have the transfers. I gave everything to Mr. Grisanti's counsel 11 days ago, and I have given the same file to the district attorney's office. And my lawyer says I'm going to be charged, and I'm going to be, and that's fine. He's lying. He's obviously been paid. I haven't been paid $1. Pruitt looked straight at Delphine for the first time. I asked. That's the humiliating part. I asked Mr. Grisanti's people what was in it for me, and they said nothing, and I did it anyway. He turned back to the tables. My mother's in a facility in New Jersey. She's 81. She doesn't know what I did. His voice went, completely. And I'd like to get to the end of this without her finding out I turned into a man who sells a sick man's room number for $9,000. He put the microphone down on the stand. That's all. Sorry. That's all I've got. And he walked off the stage and out through the service door, which is the door he knew, because that's the door he'd used his whole life. Nobody applauded. That was right. That was correct. Ilaria felt it and thought, Hood, don't. He didn't come for that. Delphine was still standing in the middle of the floor with a microphone. That doesn't change anything, she said. That's one bitter employee. Play it, said Cosimo. The quartet stopped mid-phrase, and the ballroom speakers filled 400 feet of gilt and crystal with the sound of a room on the 40th floor. Touch that painting, and I will not sue you. I will take you apart. And then, unmistakably, thinly at the pitch a voice gets when it's 4 days into something. One filing, and you're in review. And review takes 18 months, and you can't work, and you can't leave. How's Dad's insurance tied to your employment, by the way? I genuinely don't know. I'd have to look. And then, glass breaking. The recording ran 11 seconds past the crash, and then stopped. Nobody moved. A man at the front table. Silver hair. 70s. A lawyer. Everybody knew him. Leaned over and said something to Cosimo, and Cosimo answered in 3 words, and the lawyer sat back and nodded once. One-party consent, he'd said. It's my building. Delphine turned toward table 1. Toward her father. Harlan Ashcroft Vane had built 41 buildings in this city, and he had been sitting through his daughter's performance with a drink in his hand and an expression of mild interest, the way you'd watch weather. He put the drink down. And he stood up, and he buttoned his jacket, and he turned his back on her, and he walked toward the doors. He did not look at her once. Everyone in that ballroom watched a 69-year-old man leave his own table, and the sound Delphine Ashcroft Vane made was not a word. 2 officers were already at the back of the room. They'd been there 20 minutes. They took her out through the main doors, and she went quietly, and the last thing anybody saw was a woman in red looking back over her shoulder at a room full of people she had known her entire life. Not one of them met her eyes. The doors closed, and Ilaria Fontanelli walked up onto the stage with a manila folder. My name is Ilaria Fontanelli. Her voice came out clear, and it carried because she'd trained for 4 years to sing in rooms with worse acoustics than this. I was a waitress. 11 months at the Vermeil Room. Before that, I was 1 semester from a master's in conservation in Florence, and my father had a heart attack and I came home. Both of those things are true, and I'm not going to rank them. She set the folder on the podium. You've all heard I'm a gold digger, so let's do the money first, and then I'll show you the painting. She opened the folder. 10 weeks on that portrait. The first 8 I invoiced. $12,000 itemized, taxed, and I put every dollar of it into St. Ambrose Medical Center against my father's account. Receipts are in here. Pass them around, I made copies. She held up a page. Then I left, for 2 weeks, because a man lost a board seat for standing next to me, and I could not carry that. And you can all decide for yourselves what kind of gold digger walks away from the gold. Somebody somewhere near the back made a noise. I came back for the last 11 days after my work authorization was suspended, and I worked for free. $0. No car, no meals, nothing in kind. There's a letter from my attorney, and one from the Foundation's counsel confirming it, because if I'd taken a sandwich, I'd have broken federal law. She set it down. So, total compensation received by me from this family, $12,000. All of it spent on a 68-year-old man's heart. She looked out. If that's gold digging, I'm extremely bad at it. Somebody laughed. One person at table 9, and it broke something open, and the room exhaled. Now, Ilaria put her hand on the velvet. The painting. She pulled it off, and 400 people who spend their lives being unimpressed made a noise, because the woman on that canvas was alive. The green had come back, deep cool, a heavy curtain with a gold cord. The pomegranate was scarlet and split and wet-looking. The light fell from a window on the left that had been invisible since 1931, and it caught the auburn in her hair. And the face. Tired. A line between the brows. A jaw like a door closing. A mouth that was not smiling and had no interest in whether you liked it. And at her open collar, on a thin gold chain, a key. "Her name is Philomena," Ilaria said. She let it sit. "She's been hanging in this family for 123 years, and every single one of you has been told she was a contessa. She wasn't." She lifted the second cover off the smaller stand. Underneath a photographic blow-up 4 feet wide. A ledger page in copperplate. "This is a household wage book from 1899. 4th line from the bottom. F. Cuciniera." Ilaria's voice did not rise. Cook. She was the cook of that house. Absolute silence. She married the second son in 1901. He died of influenza in 1907 and left her a shipping company with 2 boats and a debt. She turned to the next blow-up. Here's her signature at the bottom of the accounts in 1908, and 1911, and 1914 through the war, and 1919 through the flu, and 1923, and 1929. She stepped back. 22 years. A woman with no surname ran that company for 22 years and handed her son an empire. She turned back to the tables, and she picked up the last page. And in 1931, 2 years after she died, her son paid a studio in Florence for Kern. She read it in the original, and then in English, restoration and improvement of the portrait of the late Philomena. She held the invoice up. He had a man paint a new face on his mother. The room moved. All of it at once a physical thing. Not repaired, not cleaned, replaced. A new jaw, a new mouth, a new throat. A high lace collar over her open one, because a woman with an open collar and a kitchen key looks like what she was. Ilaria set the paper down. Whoever held that brush in 1931 erased her from the hairline down to the shoulder. And then he came to her eyes. And he stopped. She let it carry all the way to the back tables. I don't know why. Nothing in the invoice explains it. But I know he stopped because I've spent 11 days taking his work off her, and hers is the only part of that face he never touched. And there's one more thing, and then I'll stop. She pointed at the canvas. In 1944, that house was empty. The family had gone north. There was a war on the road outside, and they were taking paintings, and the only people left in that house were the people who worked in it. She paused. The staff carried her down 11 stone steps into a wine cellar in the dark, and wrapped her in oilcloth and hid her under the racks for 11 months. And the damp nearly finished her, which is the tear you'd have seen if you'd come to this party 10 weeks ago. She looked out. They risked their lives for a painting of a woman whose face had already been taken off her. They saved her anyway, because they knew who she actually was, and they'd never stopped knowing, and nobody had ever asked them. So here's what preservation means. Ilaria's voice finally moved not louder. Lower. It doesn't mean making the past look nice. Anybody can do that. It costs $400 and it looks beautiful. And it's dead. My father restores furniture, and he told me the secret in a hospital bed 3 weeks ago, so I'll give it to you for free. She looked straight down at the center aisle. You never pretend the crack wasn't there. She turned and put one hand on the edge of the frame. There is a hairline through her shoulder that you can still see if you know where to look. I could have hidden it. I chose not to. That line is the proof that she's the same woman, and not a new one wearing her clothes. She stepped back. And one last thing, since we're doing the truth tonight. I can speak that dialect, because a woman in Astoria used it on her butcher every Saturday for 11 years, until he started lowering his prices out of exhaustion. My grandmother, Elide. She never set foot in a room like this one in her life. Her voice caught. She let it. She's the only reason I'm standing in one. Ilaria picked up her folder. She fed them. She buried her husband. She ran their boats for 22 years, and her own son was ashamed of a kitchen. I took his paint off. She doesn't need it. She was walking off the stage when the sound started. A single chair pushed back, down at the front, slow and effortful and loud in a room that quiet. Ercilia Grisanti stood up. She left the cane on the chair. She crossed to the stage, and Cosimo moved to help her, and she waved him off with one flat hand, and she climbed the 4 steps herself. 74 years old in black silk, and she took the microphone. She looked at the portrait for a long moment, then at the room. "My son will speak next," she said. "I am taking his turn." Nobody breathed. I was born in 1952 in a village near Lucca. My father was a cook. His father was a cook. We fed the family in that house for 3 generations. The room did not move. In 1974, when I was 22, the son of that house married the cook's daughter, and his mother told me to my face that my accent would finish me. Her chin came up, so I finished the accent first. It took 2 years, and when it was gone, I went looking for anything else that might give me away, and I found the songs, and I let those go too. Her hand came down on the stand. After that, there was nothing left to catch me on, and I was safe. 52 years. Ercilia Grisanti looked out at people who had known her for decades. For 52 years, every one of you has met a woman who does not exist. I built her myself. I did it very well. I did to myself exactly what that man did to her. Her hand went toward the canvas, and I did it for free, and I did it every morning, and I raised a son who has never once in his life heard his mother's real voice. She stopped. Ilaria, at the edge of the stage, saw the old woman's hand shake, and saw her not hide it. "My name," Ercilia said, "is—" and she said it. The whole thing, in dialect. Swallowed consonants, the extra music at the end of the line, a girl from a village near Lucca, introducing herself to a ballroom. Then in English, quietly. "Daughter of a cook, granddaughter of a cook." She set the microphone back on the stand. That's all. That's the speech. It only took 52 years. The room came apart. They stood, all of them, senators and shipping men and women in $20,000 gowns, and the noise went up into that 1911 ceiling and stayed there. And Ercilia Grisanti stood on a stage in front of a painting of a cook and cried, and did not cover her face. It took a long time to come down. When it finally did, people started moving toward the bar, toward the doors, toward each other, the way a room does when something has happened, and nobody quite knows what to do with their hands. Ercilia came down the 4 steps and sat back in her chair and pulled it around to face the stage. Ilaria went and stood beside her. Neither of them said anything. They looked at Filomena, and Filomena looked back the way she had been looking at people since 1903, unimpressed mid-thought, faintly irritated about something in the next room. After a while, Ercilia reached up without turning her head and put one dry, ringed hand flat on Ilaria's forearm. Not patting it, holding it, the same grip as the restaurant. "She has your grandmother's mouth," the old woman said. "She has your mouth." "Yes." Ercilia sniffed. Well, it was always going to be a bad night for somebody. And then Cosimo Grisanti walked out to the center of the stage. He didn't take the microphone. He just came down and stood in front of Ilaria and reached into his jacket. Cosimo. I know. He was already having trouble. I know you're going to say the visa and the company and the 8 weeks and that you don't want to be rescued. That's the whole speech, yes. So I'm not rescuing you. He opened the box. Inside on old velvet, a heavy gold band, worn thin on one side, set with a single dark ruby. This was hers, he said. She was wearing it in 1903. It's in the painting Third Finger, Left Hand. You can see it, now that you've cleaned her. Ilaria's hand went over her mouth. She wore it through her husband's funeral. Through 2 wars. She wore it running a company that nobody thought she could run. He was steady. Barely. It went into a wine cellar in oilcloth, and it came back out. He knelt. 400 people and a woman in black with no cane, and a painting of a cook watching from 3 feet away. I've lost the company, Cosimo said. I've got 11% a foundation and a building with a workshop in it that I'm going to fill with kids from Corona who can draw. It is significantly less than I had in the spring. Cosimo. You said one true thing in a restaurant, and everything false in my life fell down. His voice broke finally all the way. I'm not asking you to fix that. I'm asking you to stay for it. He held it up. Ilaria Fontanelli, will you marry me? She did not say yes immediately, because she was crying too hard, and because there was a thing she had to say first, and she got it out with her hand still over her mouth. It's going to be 18 months, maybe more. I can't work. I can't leave. I know. I might be a woman who sits in your apartment for 1.5 years doing nothing but paperwork. I've had a company, Cosimo said. I'd rather have the 1.5 years. Yes, said Ilaria, and then louder so the back tables got it too. See. 6 months later. There's a building on a corner in Long Island City that used to be a paper warehouse, and now it has north light through the whole top floor and a sign by the door that says in 2-inch letters, The Philomena Workshop, Conservation, Free, ages 14 and up. Tuesdays and Thursdays, there are 19 teenagers in there with magnifier lamps and swabs, and every one of them is learning to count rolls instead of seconds. Their instructor is 28 now. She still can't legally take a paycheck. Her attorney says November, probably. Maybe January. The foundation pays for the lamps, and Ilaria Fontanelli teaches for nothing, and she has a folder of documentation about it, 4 inches thick, and Marguerite Osei Bonsu checks it monthly and calls her unhinged with great affection. Tommaso Fontanelli got the valve in September. He walks now. Slowly and with a stick he made himself because the first thing his daughter did when he came home was hand him a canvas roll. Not his old chisels. Those are gone. Those are in somebody's shop in Astoria, and they are never coming back, and that is fine. New ones, bought with the first honest money she ever earned from that family. He built the frame for the portrait himself. Took him 7 weeks. Walnut hand cut, and when Ilaria pointed at a hairline join in the lower left corner and asked if he wanted to fill it, he looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Leave it, he said. That's the proof. The painting hangs on the workshop's main wall now, not in a museum, not in a penthouse. On the wall of a room where 19 kids from Corona and Jackson Heights and Sunnyside learn to take 100 years of dirt off other people's history. There's a plate under it. Brass. Ilaria wrote the text and fought for every word. Philomena Cook of this house, 1899. owner and director of the company, 1907 to 1929. Her face was painted over by her son in 1931 and recovered in 2026. Hidden and saved during the war by the household staff whose names are not recorded. We are still looking for them. And on Thursday afternoons when the workshop's full and the lights going gold on the 40th minute of a lesson, an old woman comes in and sits at the back. 75 now. Black silk. Cane in her hand like an umbrella. She doesn't teach. She corrects grips. You hold the brush too close to the ferrule, your wrist will go at 50. And sometimes when the room is loud enough that she thinks nobody can hear her, she sings. 4 lines. A stupid little thing about a girl and a chestnut and a soldier in dialect. The kind of song that has 14 verses and everybody only knows 3. And the kids don't understand a word of it. But they've stopped asking her to stop.